The third empire that's going to lay claim to being the successor to Rome, we had the first in the Byzantine Empire. We then had the expanding empire of Islam, started and founded by Muhammad. And increasingly then now in the western part of Europe, there is by the late 8th century into the early 9th century of the Common Era, the emergence of a new empire under a leader named Charlemagne. And you'll see him listed sometimes as Charles the Great. You'll see him listed as Charlemagne, which is the French equivalent, or sometimes other derivatives of that, but it's the same person. Charlemagne is going to be the sort of Frankish, Germanic, Christian warrior king who is going to then, by military means, smash together large chunks of what used to be part of the Roman Empire, although not exactly, but eventually going to be claiming to be the new Holy Roman Emperor in a recreation of the idea of a Roman emperor that had been extinguished back in the late 5th century when the last boy king, the last boy emperor had been sent home in 476 by the local invaders. Now by the year 800, Charlemagne is going to be back claiming that he is the inheritor of the Roman tradition. So now we're going to have, like I said, 3 different societies and cultures, all strategically placed around what used to be the full size of the Roman Empire, but now each of them laying claim to being a distinctive part of the Roman tradition, although each of them is very different from each other. And here's a statue of Charlemagne on horseback showing, if you look very carefully at some of the symbolism here, the idea of his rulership as he is holding on to this orb here, this globe, and then of course his power as a military warrior, and of course the crown as a royal figure. What we're going to be looking at then is, in this case, the rise of the Charlemagne and his family and the time period when he was ruling Europe and creating this new Western European empire. All right. Charlemagne's a warrior king. He had inherited from his father and from his grandfather and great-grandfather a long history of being military warriors. They had been very successful in expanding their control. They had gone from being major politicians to eventually becoming the kings of the Gauls, the kings of this area of Europe. They had essentially done a coup d'etat, let's put it to you nicely. One of the ancestors of Charlemagne had kind of set aside the previous king and set himself up instead as the new king, and had received the sanction and the support of the Bishop of Rome and sort of the blessing of the Catholic Church to do so. And I make reference to that because that means that Charlemagne's family is in part legitimated by the sanction of the religious authorities, who looked the other way when the old king was put out sort of pasture and the new family came in, and there's no nice way to wrap up a coup d'etat, but that's what's happening. In order to create a stronger and a more powerful, strengthened empire, the Bishop of Rome sort of sanctions this coup d'etat. Later on, Charlemagne will inherit all of that authority, but what we have here then is a prince who is going to use a significant military campaign setting every year possible to expand his empire. All right. In other words, Charlemagne is essentially going to be at war almost every year that he is in charge of his state, in charge of his empire. And it's a strategy that we want to think about for a moment. Let's go back to the Roman era, when the Romans had used military expansion as a way to have soldiers busy on the frontier instead of being back in Rome causing problems. Also, by an expansion of territory, there's more loot, there's more slaves, there's more opportunity to take over territory and settle former soldiers out there on the frontier, and thus expand your control and your culture. So Charlemagne's going to be at war almost every year that he is in charge of his empire, and he's not doing it just willy-nilly. There is a plan, there is a strategy, and it's useful because as a warrior leader, if he does not reward the people who follow him, he's not going to have much authority. So he has to be almost like the old Romans, constantly expanding and aggressively moving outwards. Otherwise, he's not going to have enough material goods or slaves or territory to keep the loyalty of the people who serve him. Another thing that's interesting about Charlemagne is that he's going to have a more comprehensive understanding of how to run a government. That he's going to be more sophisticated in the sense that he wants to see how to organize his state. And there's a couple of things that are interesting about that. all right? As a large military empire, he has to rely on local sort of warrior chieftains and military men who are going to be on the edges of his empire to serve him with military soldiers when he calls for them, or to simply guard the frontiers, to take care of business, so to speak, on the edges of the empire. Charlemagne uses a series of people who is eventually going to be called counts. And these are going to be the people who, in time, are going to want to claim that they are count by heredity, that since their father or grandfather had the position, that they had been favored by the emperor, by the King Charlemagne, as the leader of the military group around this area, they got to then sort of start to claim of what's going to be hereditary nobility, an organized aristocracy. Now later on, this system will expand over time, will create other kinds of titles, duke and count and viscount and land. Okay. The terminology is not as interesting as simply the idea there is now the creation of an aristocracy afoot where there will be people who can hereditarily inherit an exalted status on the basis of having served Charlemagne and being a military figure on the frontier. Another thing that's interesting about Charlemagne is that he's no fool, right? There's an old saying in English, when the cat's away, the mice will play. Let's apply that to Charlemagne's empire for a second. I'm Charlemagne. I'm in the middle of my empire that stretches for several hundred miles in every direction. How do I know the people who are working for me 300 miles south of here are doing what I told them to do? How do I know the people who are working for me 150 miles from here, are they really following what I told them to do? Are they lining their own pockets? Are they taking care of business? Are they letting me down? Are they staying prepared for the next war? How do I know? Now, in the empire that Charlemagne has, people take an oath of personal loyalty to him in the process of serving him. But on top of that, Charlemagne creates a system of what's called missi, okay? And you'll see within the word missi the origins of the words in English, missionary. Somebody who's going to go out on a mission, okay? In this case, it's not a religious mission, but a mission in the sense that they have been empowered by by Charlemagne to go and check on what the people in the countryside are doing in terms of military preparations, taxation policy, whatever it is. He's sending his direct missionaries, or missi, out to double check. He's creating a checks and balances system within government. He's not just going to take your word that you're doing what you're doing on the frontier and that you're fully obeying all orders. He's going to send somebody to come and double check. And then he might send somebody to double check the double checker. What I'm saying is that Charlemagne has a sophisticated understanding of government. Yes, you get people to take an oath to obey you. Yes, you let them do their thing, but you also check that they're doing what they said they were going to do. He's also going to be creating a better sense of a unified financial system. Remember, the old Roman Empire had in many ways been operating under coinage. Silver was it, and later on bronze and lead tokens and lots of other forms of exchange where metal coins were used. Much of that had disappeared by this time period, and he's going to have to reinvent some of it. Many of the ideas here is that you can't function, you don't have a government functioning if there's no way, for example, to pay people directly, or to, in many ways, find a way to settle debts. In many places, in many cases, there's very little cash, money circulating, so there's going to be another way of dealing with that. But at least he recognizes the idea that he's going to need to take a look at better government, better governance, and learn from the past. He's also, as he's looking for the people who are going to be working for him, he needs high-quality personnel. He needs people who are literate, who know their accounting, who know how to balance some budgets, do all kinds of things. He needs them to know various language if necessary, to talk with the local people, gather information. So at his court, he's going to start to sponsor and support a significant number of people who are writing in various forms. He's interested in collecting books. He's interested in sponsoring church redecorations, helping churchmen and Christians in need through charity. In other words, he's going to be trying to take some of the aspects of government and also have the way to support what he's trying to do by increasingly drawing in churchmen who are trained, who can serve him. Now, here's this basic empire map of where he was and how it expanded over time. And the goal here is to show you that he is an aggressively expansionistic emperor, that he has an opportunity to use his military for expansion. He is very successful at that, and he is able to move his people where he needs them, when he needs them. And for example, in this part of what is modern-day Germany, he spends a lot of time going year after year to fight the people out there. And part of the idea is, and this is what happens, after a series of military campaigns that last many, many years, he eventually forces the conversion of those people who are Saxons into being Christians. So he is not only physically expanding his empire, using his military power, he's also expanding the area controlled by Christianity and the opportunities for the spread of the gospel to non-Christian people. That is also part of what he's doing. It is also part of the reason that he is a close ally with the church. And as we recall, his ancestor had been able to be claiming to be the king with the sanction and the approval of the Bishop of Rome as the leading Christian authority in the West. Charlemagne, now we got to kind of come to the culmination. Charlemagne is going now to be created as the new emperor in the West. He is on Christmas Day in the year 800 in Rome. He goes to Mass, and there the Bishop of Rome, the Pope, places the crown upon his head and proclaims him to be the new Holy Roman Emperor. Now, on one hand, this is sort of a recreation of some of the ideas that had been powerful in the old Roman Empire. He's going to take on, Charlemagne that is, he's going to take on all kinds of ideas of old Roman titles, of Pontifex Maximus and other ideas, and Caesar and Augustus. They're recycling some of these old Latin ideas and terms in politics. He's accepting them at the same time as accepting the post as the new Western Roman Emperor. So it looks as if there's an attempt to recreate a Roman Empire, but it's going to be a totally different one. It's not based in Italy. It doesn't have a huge control of the Mediterranean Sea. It's a German and a Gaulish and a Frankish area of Europe, away from the traditional Roman areas of authority, but nonetheless, Charlemagne is being recreated as that emperor. This idea is powerful because it gives him more moral authority to see himself as the successor of the Romans. It also is the idea that the Roman Empire had never truly disappeared, that it was always there, it just needed to be recreated. And notice that it's also a key element that the cooperation of the church was vital in this. The Bishop of Rome sanctioning first the ancestor of Charlemagne taking over the throne, and now actually sanctioning the creation of Charlemagne as an emperor. This is going to be a compelling and interesting idea because in the generation afterwards, when there's a group of people who come into northern Italy and threaten the Pope in Rome, what happens is Charlemagne is going to send an army into northern Italy. He and his army are going to conquer a large area, expel and control the people who are threatening the Pope, and then turn over a large chunk of real estate to the papacy to control, to now make the Bishop of Rome not just a spiritual leader, but increasingly a landlord, someone who's running their own state, their own empire, their own country, with police services and taxation and courts. So this is going to be, in one sense, a way to help secure the papacy, giving them a distinct piece of territory around Rome that will help protect them. On the other hand, for the later Middle Ages, it's going to create a problem in the sense that could it ever be seen that the Bishop of Rome is spending too much time on his worldly power and not on his spiritual? Or will this create some kind of confusion where the outside forces that live near the papacy, maybe they covet some of the territory controlled by the papacy and go to war with it, not over spiritual issues, but over controlling a town or a tax or some resource? This is going to be a complication in the Middle Ages, and we'll spend more time in that as we go forward, but it's going to be housed here. This is the beginning of a very concrete understanding that the Bishop of Rome is not only a spiritual leader, but also a landlord. But Charlemagne's empire is going to fall apart. He had one son who inherited everything when he died. But when he died, Charlemagne had 3 living grandsons, and at a place called Verdun, they're going to chop up his empire into 3 pieces. One is going to become focused on the Franks in what is going to essentially become the rump state for a modern-day France. Another chunk is going to be on the other side of the Rhine River, that is going to be in the German-occupied areas that Charlemagne had conquered, and increasingly that's going to become a Germanic empire, and it will eventually be sort of the rump that is the creation of a united Germany. The third son got a long, skinny piece of territory that stretches from the North Sea all the way down to Italy, and that is going to be the same region that will see a very divergent culture, that the areas between a dominating French and a dominating German culture, this is going to be the Netherlands and Luxembourg and Alsace and Lorraine and other areas that are not strictly German, not strictly French. The origins of that are here within that split in the kingdom of Charlemagne. Go back into your textbooks and read carefully about Charlemagne and his empire, the various means by which he controlled it, and then do, of course, take a look and see if there's some practice questions to test your knowledge.